Thank you for being here today. We are on our third day of the pre-tribulation events. We're going to continue talking about it. I want to move through some material today instead of coming back next week and handing out the same notes, so I'm going to try to hustle. We do have on the notes that are online, on the very back page, there is a new chart that we'll kind of be building on in the weeks to come, kind of showing some time periods. What we're looking at is on page 1 of the notes, actually, today, again, just in review, the events that take place before the tribulation. The tribulation, of course, is this 7-year time period that is the final week of Daniel's prophecy. I'm just shooting this at you without any scripture. There's scriptural support, but instead of going back and reviewing it all, this begins the 7-year period. It begins with the signing of the treaty. Now, we talk about the rapture, and I believe there is a rapture of the church meeting the Lord in the air. Where it takes place here, at the mid-time, at the pre-wrath time, at the post-time, that's all to be decided. That it's going to happen. But what we're going to look at first is the foundation of this whole event, and I think we'll let it speak to us where the rapture is going to be at, instead of saying here's where we want the rapture and then building around it. So we'll see what happens. But the 7-year begins with the signing of a deal, a treaty with the Antichrist. It's called the little horn in Daniel. He's the king, the boastful king. Several things are going to take place. He's going to become a world leader. There's going to be peace early in his reign. Matthew says when people are saying peace, peace, disaster is going to come. Now that peace could be when he signs the treaty. And again, that first half of the 3.5-year period of the 7 years, the first half of the 7 years, Israel is worshiping on the Temple Mount. They're not being like sought out, slaughtered. They're functioning in Israel. So that is a time of peace at some level, although it's heading for disaster. Now, this peace could be talking about the time period before the tribulation begins, but I think we're going to see the concept. That's why the Antichrist is making treaties, is this peace. Now, the events that take place before we get here, realize one of the events, if you're pre-trib, one of the events before the tribulation begins is the rapture of the church. That's an assumption. You see, that there's not a verse that says the rapture takes place and then the 7 years begin. Daniel says the signing of the peace treaty will reinstitute the 7 years. There's 490 years decreed for Israel, told to Daniel. It begins with Cyrus's decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, as we see in the Cyrus cylinder, and it continues until the Messiah is cut off. And he was cut off in the 483rd year when the Messiah dies. And then there's this time of destruction. The temple falls. The temple falls to the people from whom the Antichrist, the little horn, the ruler, the prince who will come, arises. And so whoever destroyed the temple, that is the people that the Antichrist will come from. Daniel, that's part of the prophecy. And so this continues. And then when that prince arises and signs a treaty, so this is like an unknown how long this is going to be. We call it the church age. When that treaty is signed, we are right here with the final 7 years of the 490 years. Now, we're looking at these events right here. What has to happen before this? And so with that being said, we'll come back to this in a moment. And I mean like, eventually. The events that we see on here, on page 1, I've got 12 things written down. World wars, famines, earthquakes, a regathering of Israel from around the world. Israel has to control Jerusalem. Israel has to control the Temple Mount. There's going to be an invasion from a northern alliance called the Battle of Gog and Magog. And again, all these things, it's like, well, that happens here. That can all be discussed where it happens. The one world government is going to form. That's not going to apparently work out because it's going to be divided into 10 kingdoms, 10 toes, 10 kings. But then amongst that, coming up from somewhere else, will be a 11th king who's going to take out 3 of those 10 kings. Imagine a universal government. Is that hard to imagine? A universal world that it's all under control of this group. And then they must decide this isn't functioning. We're going to have to create our own nations, our own 10 nations, or 10 kings. And they break it up into 10 groups, 10 toes. Now, how this happens, if it's war, if it's a peaceful negotiation, or if they realize, hey, the original plan of God to have 10 or have nations instead of just a one world government seems to have a better balance for the economy, for all the power balance, health-wise, whatever. However, they break the one world government into 10 groups, 10 kings, and then coming up from somewhere is this little horn, the Antichrist, the prince who will come, and he goes to war and takes out 1, 2, 3 of those kings. And so there's only 7 left. So he controls the territory of 3, apparently. There's 7 left. He uproots these 3. Daniel's told this by the angel. And then there's now 7 kings left. And they realize, it says in Revelation, they realize they've been given this one purpose. It's like, just give their power to the Antichrist. In other words, they see 1, number 10 goes down, number 9 goes down, number 8 goes down, and there's 6 left. It's like, you can just have it. And they give up their power to the Antichrist, the last 7. And then he begins to rule. Now, where that all happens, if that happens before, but we'll see that being set up before, or does that happen after? But it would appear if he's got the authority to sign a treaty with Israel for 7 years, it seems that the one world government has come. It's been broken into 10. And then the Antichrist is powerful enough. If there's 10 kings, he's not powerful enough to make a treaty with Israel. I mean, who cares? I mean, who is he, But if he takes out 3 and he sees these others are submitting to him, he now can make a peace treaty with Israel, which then helps establish this concept of peace. Imagine if there's peace in Israel, how that could reverberate throughout the world. Now, this will take place after the Gog and Magog invasion. Okay? And then at that point, at the signing of the treaty, we begin this 7 years, and that's another discussion that we're heading towards. Okay, so you can see those things written down right there, 1 through 12. We've looked at, I'm going to read this in Matthew 24. No, I'm not going to read that again, because some of these events, famines, earthquakes, the world wars, nation rising against nation, they are taking place here. We've seen them, but they may intensify over on this side, especially with the coming of the seals. So there may be, I don't want to say a repeat, but an intensification of them. So we've looked at, number 1, nation rising against nation, referring to the world wars. We've looked at famines, and again, the famines have been sporadic, but they're throughout history. This seems like a more blanket famine, like a lack of food, more of a worldwide event. And we can say this or that, but it really seems like that's going to be something that's going to take place, an absolute, undeniable. The world is lacking food. There's areas that are lacking food, but like I said the last couple of weeks, I'm not lacking food. I go to Hy-Vee, push my grocery cart up and down the aisle, get whatever I want. So, I mean, prices are going up and all that, but there's something drastic, more drastic than I've ever seen coming. Earthquakes, that obviously is going to be a part of the 7-year here, because we see repeated earthquakes. Eventually, a great earthquake is going to split Jerusalem into 3 parts. And when Jesus returns, his feet are on the Mount of Olives, it splits in 2. So there's some major earthquakes taking place here. But as you see, and we remember the video we watched, the earthquakes have spiked in the last 100 years. Now again, you say, well, that's because they can measure them better. But it seems over the last 100 years, they've spiked. Again, if that's the case, that Jesus is referring to in Matthew 24, yes or no. But number 4 is an absolute, this is what we're going to pick up today, a worldwide regathering of Israel. On Isaiah, I'm going to go through some Bible verses, and you're going to want to use your Bible for this if you want. I don't have the verses typed out, so I'm going to flip through a bunch of verses. Isaiah chapter 11, I'm just going to show you the prophecies, Old Testament, that Israel is going to be regathered a second time. Now, this is important to say it this way. We know northern Israel, the northern 10 tribes, fell in 722 to the Assyrians, and they were dispersed. Following that, in 586 BC, the temple was burnt, Jerusalem was burnt by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians, and the Jews, Judah, along with the tribe of Benjamin and members of every tribe, because they fled down to Judah for protection from northern Israel, they were taken into captivity in Babylon. With the issuing of the Cyrus decree, mentioned in scriptures, found recorded in cuneiform, they were sent back. So there was a captivity and a dispersion, and there was a regathering of Israel with the coming of Ezra and Cyrus, the Persian Empire rising, the second beast. But the Bible talks about, Old Testament talks about a second regathering, which means that has taken place. But even as they're prophesying that, they talk about a future dispersion and another worldwide dispersion, and at some point a regathering of Israel that is called a second regathering. And so that's what we're talking about right here. And that has to take place because in 70 A.D., Romans came in, 66 to 70 A.D., the Jewish wars. They came in, burnt the temple, took destroyed Jerusalem, took people, the treasures, captive. We've seen it. We talked about it several times. There's monuments, the Arch of Titus. There's evidence there of the destruction. There's no doubt about this. And Jerusalem fell. In 135, it became a pagan city, Alea Capitolea. They renamed the land of Israel after the Philistines, and they renamed the city Alea Capitolea after Hadrian's family. That was 135 AD, and the Jews are not permitted to come back. So they were dispersed ever since 135 AD, right here during this time period, and it has continued. But in 1948, a regathering took place. And here we go, or the process began. Here we go, chapter 11, verses 11 and 12. This is what Isaiah says. I'll begin in verse 10. And this is important right here, these phrases. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples, and nations will rally to him. And his place of rest will be glorious in that day. Now, if you notice, that is talking about the setting up of the millennial kingdom right there. That's talking about that. But verse 11. In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the remnant that is left of the people from Assyria, from Lower Egypt, from Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia, from Hamath, from the islands of the sea. That's the Western world. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. Ephraim's jealousy will vanish and Judah's enemies will be cut off. Ephraim is northern Israel, who's jealous of southern Israel, Judah. That's going to vanish. They're going to be reunited. And that's going to be a process that we can say that began, if this is, again, I'm assuming 1948, the regathering of Israel began, they reestablished the land of Israel. They could be driven into the sea. From the river to the sea, Israel will be free, or Palestine, whatever. And that could happen. They could go back into dispersion. This could all reverse. But assuming that's not going to reverse, there's going to be a continual gathering. And as we get into this time period here, we're going to see a lot of activity in Israel. One, giving them the temple mount, or to build the temple, and then another regathering with 144,000 being sealed here at another point. That's all coming up. So this regathering is going to just continue to grow and build. Going on to the rest of this, takes place in two places. Point C, this phase of gathering or regathering Israel is going to be in two phases. I'm on page 2.4b. or 4C. This regathering of Israel in 1948 is in what we would say unbelief. But they're over there worshiping with the Torah and the Old Testament, following the Judaism, and that's fine, that's good. Again, and I'm looking at this from a perspective. They are back, but they are, number one, they are a secular nation. They are they're again, we can break this whole thing down. There is a religious remnant within them. We'll just say the religion, the traditional religion of the Jews is there, but the government itself is secular. They are a democracy, if you would. They are free. They are not a religious institution. The secular, to have authority and power within their people, have to cooperate with this religious group. But now even this religious group, be careful, they're not Christians. Okay, you say, well, yeah, why is that important? They're following the Old Testament. Again, without being redundant, the Old Testament is pointing towards Jesus. Okay? And so when Jesus came in the Gospels, he says he fulfilled it. Here I am. The whole Old Testament, I have fulfilled the purpose of the Old Testament is fulfilled in Christ. Here he is. So if you read the Old Testament and you see Christ, you enter into the new covenant. Jeremiah 31:31, Jesus instituted the Last Supper. You become born again. You enter the new age in the sense that you are born again, getting ready for what's coming. You're already ready for the new age. You're the first fruits. But if you read the Old Testament, you say, like the Jews did in 30 AD, he is not the Messiah. We reject him. And you continue, say, we reject Jesus. We're waiting for our Messiah. And you continue following the Old Testament saying, it's not fulfilled. We don't see Jesus. Well, now you become what we'd say Judaism. It's like, well, they're reading the Old Testament. They're reading the Old Testament blind. They're reading the Old Testament without being able to see Jesus, who is the Messiah, the new covenant. The whole thing is pointing towards him. So if you are following the Old Testament and you don't see Jesus, be careful. I don't want to be rude, but you're wrong. And if you form a religion around it, it's a false religion. You're following the religion of the priests, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, who nailed Jesus on the cross. Says, no, follow us. We're going to teach you the Old Testament or the Old Covenant. It's like, no, the Old Testament is pointing towards Jesus. No, come with us. We're going to read the Old Testament. If you're reading the Old Testament and missing Jesus, you are a false religion. Does that make sense? You're wrong. Now again, I think that's true. I'm not saying because I have any question in my mind, but I apologize for being so rude. Okay, so when they are regathered in 1948, they were not Jews regathering to meet the Messiah. They are Jews regathering for their land, and some of them to re-engage the Old Testament to look for their Messiah. So they were gathered in unbelief. Okay, the Jews in 1948 and up to today as a nation are unbelievers. They haven't been refined. They've been, well, here we go, page 2.4b. This takes place in two phases, the regathering of Israel. A regathering in unbelief in preparation for judgment. God is going to say, I will regather you a second time to bring you to the land, to put you in Jerusalem, to put you in the refiner's fire. I'm going to put you in the furnace of Jerusalem. It's like, okay, it's time to build faith. And he's going to bring them back and put them right here and say, let the fire begin. And he's going to purify them so that by the time he gets to this point of this process, they are regathered in faith. In fact, they're going to find and understand the new covenant. Not all of them. There's going to end up being, as we go through this, 4 groups of Jews, and one of them is going to be like, oh my gosh, we understand. They'll share, try and bring others, and it will grow as this regathering for faith begins. But a large group of the Jews will be rejected during this time period because they've, once again, are going to reject Jesus Christ. Okay, so with some verses for this, see if I can do this now. Go to Ezekiel chapter 20. It's always nice to be able to verbalize something like I just have and then come back and read it from the scriptures and go, oh, wow, look, that's exactly what it says. instead of saying, just trust me, I've studied my Bible, I know what it says, you don't need to read it. All right, Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 33 through 38. Here we go. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I will rule over you with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with outpoured wrath. I will bring you from the nations, see, and gather you from the countries where you have been scattered, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with outpoured wrath. And say, wow, look, it was like a work of God bringing Israel back as a nation. Yes, it was. He said it would be. And why are they there? For wrath. I will bring you into the desert of the nations, and there, face to face, I will execute judgment upon you, as I judged your fathers in the desert of the land of Egypt. So will I judge you, declares the sovereign Lord. I will take note of you as you pass under my rod, and I'll bring you into the bond of the covenant. The bond of the covenant. Oh, he's going to reinstitute the old covenant with them because they stopped following the law of Moses. No, that's the problem. They're still trying to follow the law of Moses because they've rejected the new covenant. He's going to bring them into the land, and he says, bring them back, and then talks about going into the desert. That's all coming up here in detail later on in Revelation, in Daniel, that they're going to go to, Jesus says, flee to the mountains. Daniel says Moab, Edom, and Ammon, which is the land of Jordan. Isaiah says they're in Basra, which is Petra, which is a Petra in the mountains in Jordan. So they will flee Jerusalem during some event. We know what it is, when the Antichrist enters their temple and says, he's God, worship me. They're supposed to say, uh-oh, and flee. And four different people tell you where they flee. It's all different verbiage, but it's the same place. And they're going to be brought into an understanding. It says right here, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. And that's Jeremiah 31, the new covenant. I will purge you of those who revolt and rebel against me. Who is revolting and rebelling against him? The nations? That's another whole story. The nations are the nations. He's talking about his people. Who's revolting and rebelling against him? The same ones who nailed him on the cross. And now they're still revolting and rebelling, saying, we want to worship in the temple. Why do you want to worship in the temple when Jesus is the Lord? And so he's going to bring them into the wilderness where there's no temple and say, look at me. He says it's going to be just like, what could I compare it to? Oh, leaving Egypt at the Exodus and spending 40 years in the wilderness. And they spent 40 years in the wilderness because of unbelief. These people are going to be like, okay, it's going to break through. They're going to understand. Although I will bring them out of the land where they are living, yet they will not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Okay, it goes on with some other things right there. Let's go to Ezekiel. Okay, going on to the notes. Point E at the bottom of page 2. The purpose is to prepare Israel for the new covenant. That's Ezekiel 20, verse 37. We just read it. I'll bring them into the bond of the new covenant. It'll be national survival. Remember I could just camp on this for the next 3 weeks. I'm trying to actually cover some ground today. That's where Paul says all Israel will be saved. That's where Zechariah says to look on the one they pierced and mourn. It's like all of a sudden, and all Israel that's been brought to this point will be like, so this is a regathering in unbelief. Get excited. We see things happening. But if you're Israel, it's like, stay strong, but you ain't figured it out yet. You're going into the furnace. You're going into the refiner's fire. And on this side, if you make it, you will have entered into the new covenant, which you could have entered into in 30 A.D., but you nailed it on the cross. Well, which was part of the new covenant. But now, anyway, you understand that, and we'll refer to that other times. The purified nation will then, point G on page 3, the purified nation will be able to turn to the Lord. Ezekiel 36, 22 through 24 explains some more there. We could look at those. Then starting on point I, this regathering process began in 1948. 1948 to 1949, after they came back and were given the land, this is your area, they are invaded by several Islamic or Arab or Muslim countries. Says, we're not going to put up with it. And that was the War of Independence in 1948. As soon as they got there, United Nations says, there you go. Have a good time. There's your land. Arab nations invaded the War of Independence, 1948 to 1949, and they quickly defeated those. And their boundaries expanded tremendously. They kept some of the land, but in peace negotiations, they brought back and said, you can have that back and just leave us alone. So that was 1948, and they established their control of the Old Testament city of Jerusalem, or they controlled Jerusalem, the city, because of this, but they didn't control eastern Jerusalem, the east side. Right here, this is the east side where the Temple Mount is at. So they got up to a certain part, but they didn't control the eastern side. That continued for 19 years. Jerusalem remained a divided city for 19 years, from 1948 to 1967. And then on a holy day, the Arabs decided, we'll invade Israel while they're having a Sabbath. And they invaded, and it took 6 days for Israel to drive them back again. 6 days. Now again, Israel's here. The Arab nations are very large. And in 6 days, they took control of eastern Jerusalem. They took control of all, well, right here, I'll read this. The 6-Day War of 1967 gave Israel control of the Temple Mount, West Jerusalem, and all the land up to the West Bank. Israel had to eventually get control of the Temple Mount, as the Bible says, but there we got a little map showing you the West Bank, and part of that was negotiation of giving peace to them. But Israel controlled now the whole city of Jerusalem. So according to prophecy, they had to be reestablished as a nation, regathered in unbelief. They had to get the land, Israel, and they had to get the city of Jerusalem. But you're going to have the Temple Mount under your control to fulfill point 3 there at the bottom. Daniel 9:27, Matthew 24, 2 Thessalonians 2, Revelations 11, all say Israel has a temple. Now, just put this in perspective. There's been, we'll say, 1, 2, 3 temples. This was Solomon's that he built. That was destroyed in 586. This would be the temple of Ezra that he built that was morphed into Herod's temple. Herod just slowly dismantled it and rebuilt it so it was the glorious temple of the New Testament. They didn't destroy it. They just remodeled under very strict priest supervision. So that's the second temple. This was destroyed in 586 BC. This one of Herod's was destroyed in 70 AD. And so in 70 AD, this temple is gone. So there's going to have to be a third temple. Well, you say, yeah, but how do you know there's a third temple? They could be referring to one of these previous temples. Well, so here you go. Daniel is written in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, talks about Israel worshiping in a temple with the Antichrist breaking the treaty. So Solomon's temple's gone. He could be talking about Herod's temple. So that's possible. Matthew 24, Jesus talking in Herod's Temple Mount, or right after leaving Herod's Temple Mount, and he's saying there won't be one stone left upon another. He's prophesying as he's saying this, so his prophecy is going to conflict if you say that, because he's saying there's not going to be one stone. Look how magnificent this temple is. He says, guys, are you even paying attention? There's not going to be one stone left here. It's going to be total. There it is. Again, we could talk all about that. But then he says, you'll see the Antichrist, or the abomination of desolation setting up in the holy place, and he talks about the temple. So I thought it was going to be destroyed. Now, preterists would say that was fulfilled in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed it. So there's that possibility. 2 Thessalonians, that's going to be written around 52 AD. So Herod's temple was still standing. Paul could be referring to Herod's temple. The problem comes in Revelation 11, that was written in 96 AD, unless you're preterist and you think it was written in 64 AD, because you've got to push it back to 64 AD to make it fit your prophecy. But if you understand history, you understand the church history, the early writers, it was written in 96 AD. We know who the emperor was. It was written in 96 AD. So it was written, John's is written after this event, talking about this temple right here. I think Daniel's talking about it. I think Matthew's talking about it. I think Paul's talking about it. But we know for sure John is talking about a third temple. He can't be talking about Solomon's or Herod's temple. They're gone. So there will be a regathering of the nation. They will regain the land. They will take control of the city of Jerusalem. They will take control of the Temple Mount, and they will build a temple. Now, when they build that temple, is that something right here? Is the building of the temple on this side of the signing of the covenant? I can't tell you that. It could be. Right here, they make a covenant with the Antichrist, which would be a great time for them to build the temple right away there. Now, they are ready to do it today. I've been to the Temple Institute, held one of the lampstands that sits on the menorah that's going to go in the third temple. I held up my hand. They had me in the front row. Of course, I was in the front row. They said, would you come over and hold this? Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know. And so that's put, again, if that happens or not, that's their plan, is they've got all the furnishings ready to go. And they even says, if we gain control of the Temple Mount today, we are ready to do the evening sacrifices tonight. Now, they've got the altar, forklift the little altar, the temporary altar up there, put it on the Temple Mount, and they're offering evening sacrifices today. They're ready. That's what they said 2010 when we were there. And that's been, 14 years ago. So nonetheless, the temple, that's enough of that. Okay. That's what I'm looking at here, putting this together. You don't have to agree with this, but that's where this is heading. That's basically what that says right there. Turn the page. Oh, good. Now, here's some new information. Okay. And Israel controls the temple on 19. So, on top of page 4, everything we've mentioned has already happened. If you want to go World War I, the earthquakes, potentially the famine. I'm still questioning the famine. I think there's going to be something more severe. 48, regathering. They've got control of Jerusalem. They've got control of the Temple Mount. The secular leaders in 1967, they had control of the temple. They could have built the temple. I talked to someone in the Western Wall tunnels, a Jew that was giving the tour. They says, this is the Eastern Wall right here. Imagine the Western Wall on the other side, and then the tunnels that go along the base down here that are going underneath. We were in the tunnels underneath the Temple Mount, going up, looking at the big stones that were covered up by time. And they were saying, we don't know what happened. And this was a religious Jew talking. They says, we got control of the temple. We won it in war. But when they went in to make peace negotiations, the secular Jews, they came out and says, we made a peace treaty. But Muslims will be the authorities on the Temple Mount. And it's like, and they go, why did you do that? Well, I don't know. But why would the secular Jews tell the Muslims, you can keep it? Because if we keep it, the radical right terrorist groups of us, bad terminology, but the radicals among us, the religious, are going to want to bulldoze the Dome of the Rock, or at least build a temple right beside it, and we got World War III. We thought the Holocaust was bad. We'll just let the Muslims control it, and we'll have peace. Our own people, the extremists, could end up taking us into this right here. So in 1967, we were right here in 1967, and the secular Jews says, no, we'll give it away. So up here, this is controlled by Muslims. Jews can go up there, depending on how the Muslims are feeling. They can't pray. They can't stand and have any kind of, but it's controlled by the Muslims. Now, I think that's the time of the sign. How do you say it? Sign of the times. Because they're going to get permission or somehow to build a temple, and somehow this treaty, it doesn't say specifically, it says this 7 years begins when the Antichrist signs the treaty with Israel, but right there, I think that's where temple worship is reestablished. And of course, it is. Just like the secular Jews were afraid of, you just put us in the fire. You just put us in the refiner's fire right here. So I think we're waiting for that. Now, is it tomorrow? Is it next week? Is it after the election? Is it in the year 3000? I don't know. I don't know when that's going to take place. Okay. But anyway, here we are. Now, moving on quickly. Are you pleased with how fast we're proceeding right here? Okay. Point 7, another thing that has to take place. Go to Ezekiel chapter 38. This is an invasion of the Northern Alliance against the nation of Israel. Now, again, the question is going to come up, has this already happened? Is it going to happen at the end of time? Is it a metaphor? Is it an allegory? Or is this a real event? Those are all questions. Seriously, that's all questions you should say. This is Ezekiel talking about the Babylonian invasion that destroyed the temple in 586. Oh, okay, this has already been fulfilled. Okay, check the box and move to the next chapter. Or you could say, this is in the future. This is because in Revelation it talks about at the end of the millennium, at the end of the 1,000 years, Satan is released. Now here, another whole subject here. Satan's released from the abyss, and he goes off and deceives the nations and Gog and Magog, and they march on Jerusalem at the end of the 1,000 years, millennium, and then fire from heaven consumes them, and that battle's over. So it could be that battle. Okay, that's a fair question. That could be. It could be that there's this great battle at the end here. We'll get into it. Armageddon. It could be another description of Armageddon. That's fair. But there's enough difference that I'm not accepting this as Armageddon. I'm not accepting this as Nebuchadnezzar, and I don't think this is the end of the millennium invasion led by Satan against Jerusalem. Again, with that being said, if you disagree, that's healthy. That's fine. I'm just trying to put pieces together. It's like a puzzle. I mean, this is thinking like a puzzle. Again, what irritates me sometimes is people that, and I'm that guy sometimes, that absolutely know the truth. Don't even question me. I've already studied this. I know it. And the reason I'm a little sensitive about that, because when I was 23, back in the 70s even, I knew this stuff. I mean, have you even read this? I could teach it. And then I learned some things and I changed my position. And now that I've made some adjustments, it's like, how dare you question me? Because, wait, I never saw that verse. That changed. Okay. Well, that clarifies some things. Okay, now, if you'd all just sit down and shut up and let me teach my class, that's a good question. That doesn't make sense, does it? Huh. And it's like putting together a piece of a puzzle and being arrogant enough to just pick up every piece and if it doesn't fit, just hammer it a little bit, and there I put it together. It's like, no, you didn't. It doesn't even look like anything. Is you put a piece and you set it aside and you grab another piece and you put this thing together. It's designed that way. It's a mystery. We're talking about things that haven't happened. Even Daniel was asking the angel questions. And Daniel says, after hearing all this stuff about him, he goes, what's the outcome going to be? The angel says, go your way, Daniel. Things will happen. You'll rest with your fathers and be resurrected at the end to receive your allotted inheritance. Hey, I don't even understand what you're talking. So he said, I wrote it down, but it's like I said before, thank God I'm here, because Daniel was confused, but now that I'm here, I can explain it to you. Well, that's just total ignorance. I mean, that's disrespectful of Scripture. Now the other group that this almost makes me vomit. This also almost makes me vomit. It really does. Spiritually just wants me to just regurgitate. So that, no one knows the day or hour. No one knows. Right. So let's get started and see how close we can come. Well, you know what the Lord said. Well, the Lord said, He says, be watching. I warn you, don't be deceived. These things are coming. It'll look like this. It'll be like this. You'll be thinking this. But no man knows the day or hour. Which means we don't need a study. It's like, no. You're not going to be able to finish the puzzle until it happens in front of your eyes. But that is not an excuse to say, well, I'm not one of those extremists that gets into end times. Heck, I'm not even one of those guys that reads my Bible. I'm just a Christian that just loves everybody. Okay, we're done. Don't even come back. I mean, that's ridiculous. Okay, I'm getting emotional now because that makes me mad, because it's like people say, why are you doing all this? This looks so complicated. It's like, well, yeah, Daniel didn't understand it. Ezekiel talked about it. We're putting that together with what Jesus said in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then John wrote Revelation. And at the end of the book of Revelation, he's so overwhelmed, he falls down to worship an angel. It's like, an angel says, don't do this. And John's like, oh my gosh. It's like, so you say, wow, this looks complicated. Yeah. The apostles, the prophets, the apostles listening to Jesus teach were like, they're going to misunderstand it. And Jesus says, don't be deceived. So looking at this is healthy as long as you realize it's puzzle pieces. There's absolute truth, and it's absolutely in here in the Scriptures. But my presentation of it is, it's going to change. I'm going to improve, hopefully. But here's the best I've got today. We are in Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to read through this. Here's what you're going to see. I'm going to read through these verses. Oh boy, there's a lot of verses. There's going to be an alliance of the invaders from the north is going to be described. The location of the invasion, the mountains of Israel. The goal of the invaders is plunder. They're going to come into Israel to plunder, to get spoils, to get electricity, to get oil, to get computer chips, to get vegetables. I don't know what. They're coming for plunder. There's something they want. God's goal for bringing them here is to destroy them. He says, hey, do you see, we've got all these computer chips. Don't you wish you had these computer chips for your missiles? Yeah, come get them. Now he destroys them. Thanks for trying. The destruction of the invaders, and then the location of the destruction of the invaders, and God's name is sanctified. You see, all of this is not just for Israel. God says in many of these prophecies, I will do this because the nations have mocked my name. My name has been dishonored among the nations because of Israel and because of them just trouncing on Israel whenever they want to. He says, but I will dignify my name. I will glorify my name. Israel, come here, you rebellious people. I need to use you and bring you over here. There, I've reestablished them. Now invade them. Now you're destroyed. Now Israel, are they believers? Not yet. I'm working on that. But you don't mess with my name. When I say I'm going to do something, and so he's going to be doing a lot of these things. Say, well, that sounds kind of selfish. Well, he's God. Obviously, everything he does is for his purpose. It's like, well, how's that good? Because he's God. He's got the plan. And so he's going to dignify his name in all these events and bring glory to himself. And eventually Israel's going to come around and Israel themselves will glorify him. Okay, here we go. This is Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel 38 and 39, the battle of Gog and Magog. I think, and the reason we're doing this right now today, I think Gog and Magog have to take place before the treaty is signed with Israel by the Antichrist. But I think it can't happen until Israel is restored as a nation. There's got to be an Israel on the map to be invaded from the north. But Israel is going to defend themselves, or God is going to defend Israel, which may set up the reason the Antichrist says, whoa, I need a treaty with these people. I don't know. Here it is. And as we read this, you can keep an open mind. Has this already happened historically? Bible commentator after commentator say there's no place in history something like this has happened. We've seen Assyria come in. We've seen Babylon come in. We've seen Alexander the Great pass through. None of it was this. Is it something that's going to take place in the distant future after the millennium? Possibly. Is this the Battle of Armageddon? Possibly. Or is this something that's going to take place between 1948 and the signing of the treaty by the Antichrist, which I do not know that date. It could be between 1948 and 3048. I don't know. Here it is. Chapter 38, look back at your chapter 37 at the title of that chapter. What's that title? Chapter in your Bible's got it titled something. The Valley of Dry Bones. That's not biblical text. That's just the editor's. So this is the gathering of Israel, dry bones, and Ezekiel's showing these dry bones. The Lord says, "Can these bones live again?" Interestingly, same thing John says. Ezekiel says, "Well, you know." Can these live? He goes, "You know." When John is asked, this great multitude that's come up to heaven, he says, "John, you know where these came from?" John says, "You know." He refers back, "Tell me." And that answer is they come out of the Great Tribulation. So that's chapter 37 is the gathering of the coming back alive. Okay, so Israel is now a nation again at some point in the future. And it continues. Chapter 38. The word of the Lord came to me, Ezekiel, "Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out of you and your whole army, your horses and your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. Persia, Cush, Put, will be with them, all the shields and her helmets, so Gomer with all of her troops, Beth Togarmah from the north, all of its troops, and many nations with you. Okay, so he calls that confederation. And we could go through that and show you a map. I've got several maps in different books, and we could show you a map. I don't want to tell you exactly what I think it is yet. Just listen to the text. Get ready, he tells this nation, this alliance. Be prepared, you and all your hordes gathered about you, and take command of them. After many days, you will be called to arms in future years. So after many, meaning, get ready. There's going to be a day I'm going to call upon you. It's going to be in many days, in future years. I'm going to have you do this. After many days, future years, you will invade a land that, here, ready, has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel. So, after many days, this group of people has been gathered from the nations, and they're in the mountains. They had been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. You and all your troops and many nations with you will go up, advancing like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land. Now again, that describes Jerusalem living in safety. You say, well, wait. They've had wars. They've got the Iron Dome. They just had the thing you take. Was it October 7th? Was the date? It's like that doesn't like say no. You understand what they were doing? There was an invasion. They're having a concert on the beach. People were dancing, listening to music. They're living in security. They're living in safety. We've been there ourselves several times, and you can see that there's military everywhere, but it's safe. It's so safe. I've walked around the streets of Jerusalem at 1 o'clock because you fly from Iowa to Jerusalem, and that your days are all mixed up. I walk around 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, just walking around the streets by myself in Jerusalem. It's like, is it safe? Yeah, the only thing out there would be like cats running across chasing mice or something. It's like, it's perfectly safe. So again, are they threatened? Yeah, but have they got security? They have. Okay, so keep that in mind. Verse 10, this is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind, talking to Gog in the north, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. And that's exactly what it is. When we would travel, like we'd stop and we'd check into like these, not a hotel, but they're like little apartments, little houses, little, what do you call them? Hostels. And they're unwalled. You just pull in, pay your fee and spend the night, get back up and go to the next site. So they're unwalled villages. There's no security guards there. It's like check into a hotel here, except they're like little houses. I will invade a land, Gog says, of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins. See that? Resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all the villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? In other words, there's going to be some blowback when he begins from Sheba. That would be Yemen, Dedan, and Tarshish, and that would be like the Western countries. Again, here I'm getting too specific. They're saying, whoa, you're just invading for your own advantage. This is not to do with, any other reason except for plunder. So it'll be some protest. Therefore, son of man, Ezekiel, the Lord says to Ezekiel, prophesy and say to Gog, this is what the sovereign Lord says. In that day, when my people Israel are living in safety, will you not take notice of it? You will come from your place in the far north, you and many nations with you. Now again, when anybody invades Israel, they invade from the north, because you've got to come around the Sea of Galilee, come through and come down into the Jezreel Valley, the Valley of Armageddon, and there's a way you've got to come in and land. That Babylon invaded from the north. Everybody came in from the north. But this is from the far north, talking about on the map, directly north of Jerusalem, it would appear. And that would be, if you want me to just say, it's Russia. It's that area and the nations surrounding that. You will come from your place in the far north, you and many nations with you, all of them riding on horses and a great horde, a mighty army. You will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. In days to come, in the future, Gog, I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I show myself holy through you before their eyes. In other words, I am doing this, Gog, the reason I'm doing this is you're going to invade my people, and the reason is so that the nations may know me. Now they'll know that, because Israel's not going to like send off all their missiles and send their military. It's all of a sudden it's going to be a natural disaster, and they're going to be wiped out. And they're going to go, whoa, there's something special about Israel, and it is their God. So he's saying, I'm going to bring glory to myself. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Are you not the one I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel? At that time they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. This is what will happen in the day when Gog attacks the land of Israel. My hot anger will be aroused, declares the sovereign Lord. In my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence, like a theophany. The mountains will be overturned, the cities will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the sovereign Lord. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will execute judgment upon him with plague of bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain and hailstones and burning sulfur on him and his troops and on the many nations with him. So some kind of natural upheaval, earthquakes, possibly volcanic activity. It's going to rain down on this horde coming into Israel. And they'll start fighting each other, just like Old Testament stories. And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 39. Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right. On the mountains of Israel you will fall. You and all your troops and nations with you. I will give you as food to all kinds of carrion birds and to wild animals. You will fall in the open field, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. I will send, okay, so that they're going to die, and the birds are going to, it sounds like Armageddon, where the birds are called in to eat. But there it says, we're not done though. I will send fire on Magog and on those who live in safety in the coastlands, and they will know that I am the Lord. The home cities will have fire come on them. Now, is that coming from volcanic activity? Is that Israel now releasing their missiles? I mean, somehow the cities are going to start burning, including the cities of the coastlands, which would be western cities. I will make known my holy name among my people Israel. I will no longer let my holy name be profaned, and the nations will know that I, the Lord, am the Holy One in Israel. It is coming. It will surely take place, declares the sovereign Lord. This is the day I have spoken of. Now again, does this sound like the end? It does sound like the end in the sense that everybody's going to know, because right here at the end, this whole time period right in here, the wrath period of God, is he's making himself known to the nations. Is that what we're talking about here? It seems like it's almost like an introductory. I'm putting it right here. I'm giving you a warning shot. I am going to start moving here, and then it's going to begin this 70th week. Okay, again, you got to decide where this fits. It's a puzzle piece. Now in the sequence, where are you going to place it? Okay, I'll make myself known, declares the Lord. I have so. Okay, verse 9. This is interesting. Then all the enemy is dead, laying in the mountains. Bodies dead. Birds are eating them. Rats are coming up and dragging them off. You know, it's just disaster. Cities are burning around the world because of fire that fell on them. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use the weapons for fuel and burn them up. The small and large shields, the bows and arrows, the war clubs, the spears, Now again, that sounds like ancient warfare. And maybe going, we're heading towards a third world country right now. Maybe the whole world goes third world. And we're back to riding horses and shooting arrows at each other. Or this is going to just, best reference they have for modern weapons. Again, take that in, whatever. But they're going to go out and collect the weapons, and Israel's going to burn them for fuel. Now this starts to sound like, whoa. Doesn't sound like the end. It's like they're collecting the weapons. Israel's collecting the weapons, getting ready for, we'll use these for fuel. It makes it easier to go back up here, especially this verse right here. For 7 years, they will use them for fuel. Whoa! 7 years. Now, that's not a slam dunk. That's just a very convenient verse. It's like, well, now, that if you could I wish they put a date in here. For 7 years. Whoa. I'm not saying that's a date, but it's like, that's 7 years. And that, if you're going to put it here, Armageddon, then you're going to, for 7 years into the millennium, you're burning these weapons for fuel, which that could work too. It doesn't say it's a special 7 years. It's just it could be burning fuel for 7 years here after Armageddon. But it's just interesting. That's not a slam dunk. It's just like a very, that's where the puzzle piece snaps in place. You're like, whoa, that fit. I didn't think that was going to go there, but it does. Okay. For 7 years, they'll not need to gather wood from the fields or cut it from the forest. They will use the weapons for fuel, and they will plunder those who plundered them and loot those who looted them, declares the sovereign Lord. On that day, verse 11, I will give Gog a burial place in Israel, and we know exactly where this is, in the valley of those who travel east towards the sea, towards the Dead Sea. It will block the way of travelers because Gog and all the hordes will be buried there. So it will be called the Valley of Haman Gog, or the Valley of Gog. And it basically looks like it's going to be a landfill, and it's going to have you can't travel on the east side of the Dead Sea because of all the heavy construction equipment moving bodies and dumping bodies into this burial place, this mass burial ground. That's what it's talking about. It's on the east side of the Jordan River going down towards the Dead Sea. For 7 months, the house of Israel will be burying them in order to cleanse the land. They're going to have to clean the land up because there's dead bodies all over the land. It takes them 7 months. All the people of the land will bury them, and the day I am glorified, see right here, what happened because of this? The day I am glorified will be a memorial day for them, declares the sovereign Lord. I mean, it's going to become a national holiday. Remember the day that Gog came. Men will be regularly employed to cleanse the land, government positions. Some will go throughout the land, and in addition to them, others will bury those that remain on the ground. At the end of the 7 months, they'll begin their search. Search for what? Body parts they missed. As they go through the land, and one of them sees a human bone, he'll set up a marker beside it until the grave diggers have buried it in the valley of Haman Gog. So you're going to have guys going through, okay, we got everything. Okay, let's line up and go through it. And you guys are the flaggers. Oh, flag. They probably got some kind of location device on them. And then comes the grave diggers. Okay, they got the suits on and the gloves, and they pick it up and throw it into the back of the truck. And they're picking up where all the bones from where that were flagged. So you got flaggers and you got the grave diggers. I lost my place. What verse are we in? I looked up and I didn't know where. Okay. Oh, cleanse. Okay. Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Call out every kind of bird, and it sounds like Armageddon, and all the wild animals. Assemble and come together from all around the sacrifice I am preparing for you, a great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. There you'll eat the flesh and drink blood, talk to the animals. You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of princes in the earth as if they were rams and lambs and goats. All of them fattened animals from Bashan, and that would be over on the east side of Galilee where they have good animals, good cows. At the sacrifice I am preparing for you, you will eat fat till you are glutted and drink blood until you are drunk, talking to the animals. At my table you will eat and fill your horses and riders and mighty men and soldiers, eat your fill of all these. Okay, verse 21, I will display my glory among the nations will see this, and all the nations will see the punishment I inflict and the hand I lay upon them. From that day forward, the house of Israel will know that I am the Lord their God. And the nations will know that the people of Israel went into exile for their sin because they were unfaithful to me. So I hid my face from them and handed them over to their enemies, and they all fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to their uncleanness and their offenses, and I hid my face from them. Talking about, the dispersion that they're now being regathered from. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will now bring Jacob back from captivity and will have compassion on all the people of Israel, and I will be zealous for my holy name. Again, once this happens, there's going to be even more people gathering. Once this starts to happen, there's going to be a continual gathering in Jerusalem or in Israel until finally they break off into 4 different groups. Therefore, the sovereign Lord, Jacob back, I'll have compassion. They will forget the shame of their unfaithfulness and showed towards me when they lived in safety in the land with no one to make them afraid. When I have brought them back from the nations and have gathered them from the countries of their enemies, I will show myself holy through them in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord their God. For though I sent them into exile among the nations, I will gather them to their own land, not leaving any behind. I will no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the house of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord. Now again, that does not mean that pouring out of the Spirit happened here or on that day. It's a process that's going to be taking place right here. It's setting up this last period of time. That's what I think that is referring to. So that is, we'll pick this up next week, but that is number 7, the invasion of the Northern Alliance. And again, I can show you maps of where all those cities are, but that was just the regathering of Israel, and then there's going to be an invasion. So if we're looking for signs, events, we should see Israel regathered. We should see them regain control of Jerusalem. We should see them gain control of the Temple Mount. And at some point, we should see this invasion from the north coming in that's going to be earth-shattering. Not October 7th was bad, but this is going to be something that the nations are going to step back and go, okay. And one from the nations, the Antichrist we'll talk about next week, he's going to say, yeah, we need to get some kind of agreement with these people because we fear who they are, their God. And then he'll let them sacrifice, but at the halfway point, he's going to say, you know what? I think I can be God. And so this time of peace and safety will come after this event. Because that's right, we're in this time of tribulation, and this is called peace and safety. Jesus says that when people are saying peace and safety, disaster is getting ready to break loose. So they'll have this event. A treaty, again, could be signed by the Antichrist. Peace and safety. Israel has their Temple Mount. They're worshiping. Everything's fine. And then after 3.5 years, the Antichrist says, okay, I'm going to break this treaty, and I'm God. And then Jesus says, okay, now we've just entered a new phase. And that, again, didn't get to it. But this right here will eventually build on this. And I want to point out on this, oh man, there's the reference to the time of the Gentiles. We'll talk about that. The thing called tribulation. I'm calling this whole period the tribulation because that's the technical term for it. But there's going to be tribulation through the halfway point. But at the halfway point, once the Antichrist enters the temple, that becomes the Great Tribulation. That is a clear turning point in all the prophecies. That becomes the Great Tribulation. But that, Jesus, those days will be cut short. If they weren't cut short, no one would survive. And those are cut short by, I think, the 6th seal, when he cuts that short and begins then, right in here, the day of the Lord, where he starts pouring out judgment on the nations. But he has to cut that short because if he was allowed this great tribulation to continue, the persecution of believers and Jews would have been successful. There would be none left. Jesus says it himself. Again, he says those days will be cut short. He says if they weren't cut short, there would be no survivors left. So he cuts it short somehow to save people from disaster. And then all that's going to come as we put this more together. So next week we talk about the beast that's coming, the 4th empire, the one world government that breaks into 10 kings, 10 nations. which then is overcome by the Antichrist, little horn. I'll pray and we're done. Thank you for being here. Father, we thank you for the chance to look into your word. We ask that we would handle it diligently, that we would honor your name as we consider these things, that we're not just curious, but we're looking for things that you've taught us to be prepared so that we understand where we're at in history, that we can do the things you've called us to, that we would be bold, confident, and be able to face even our own difficulties and persecutions because of your glory, because of your promise, because of your name that rests upon us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for your time.